welcome everybody to the January 7th workshop, and we'll call it to order. This evening, have at it. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. So, as you mentioned, Mayor Kayer, the first item on your workshop agenda is for a discussion on a text amendment to the zoning ordinance that would amend the zoning and land use code relating to solar energy systems. And just real quickly, I think David and I both will try to take a few moments here and there just to, for those of you new council members that maybe are not totally familiar with the zoning ordinance and the processes that we deal with in planning and code enforcement. So a text amendment is going to be proposing to make a change to the zoning ordinance itself. Part of this deals with adding some definitions, and then the other part is for a teeny tiny chart that was also in your packet. We'll show you, hopefully one will be a little bit larger. You can see a land use chart that will be adding some language, proposed language to include solar energy facilities in the form of utility facilities, utility structures that will be added. So we'll explain all those things as we go along, but just so you know that the City Council are the legislative body that makes the formal final decisions on changes to our zoning ordinance. So over the last year, 8 months or so, there's been a number of solar energy facility providers who have come to our office or have called us with interest in building large-scale, perhaps 10 to 20 acre solar farms, solar arrays in Lewiston. This is based on changes in state law, has made it more better incentives, and it's more easily done now as with the new administration in place. As we understand it, there's going to be a competition basically for projects that are been approved and shovel-ready that will be put into a competition, competing to be the first ones to get granted the permission to construct these large projects, and that competition would be somewhere in late June and July of this year. So as folks have been contacting us and interested in looking at properties, there are situations basically in our zoning ordinance and our land use code. There's a chart. I'm not sure if this is going to show or not, but
as well if Mr. Gudis helps us.
The man behind the curtain. There we go. And so in total, you can see there's a chart, lots of columns. The columns represent the different zones, and then lists by categories, residential, commercial, industrial type uses, and there's many different uses that'll fit on this chart. And another one of the categories is public utilities, and let me zoom in on that area so you can see what we've been working with to make a change and what's before you tonight. So if you can see right there, this public utility area, additional use is something that would be either approved by the Board of Appeals or by the Planning Board, and it requires the applicant to show that they wouldn't have detrimental. When we were approached by the Planning Board or Board of Appeals and make a appeal basically that their solar project is similar to other utility type projects, and that would take another month and the solar array, 10 to 20 acre project, or in this case there's no noise.
Or unfamiliar to it, whenever there's new language proposed in the Code of Ordinances, whether it's the zoning land use code or the Code of Ordinances, and old language is struck out, so you'll see lines going through it. So put them all into the new language in there, underlying language. We thought about transmission
of units on their property. Did they have to go through, and this would basically shorten the process for future?
Necessarily that's something going on the grid or going to, being regulated, through the public utilities. No different than if you wanted to put a solar facility on the roof of your house.
Okay.
What we're talking about with that only use of that property out there, then they would need to go through the planning board. That said, when Geiger went through the process, they did incorporate that into their whole development review process when they did the expansion out there, because there are items we have to address like stormwater, impervious surface things.
Councilor Ray?
About just for energy use.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from councilors?
Maybe worth noting situation here. We went to the board and said, hey, we'd like to have them initiate an amendment. Zoning and land use amendments require an action from the planning board, and then it comes to you folks, and there's 2 readings.
To look at this issue and come back and make recommendations to the council. We're in the process of getting ready to implement the ordinance. One part of that is work that everything requested in the ordinance was on the application form. One of the items that's included in the ordinance is providing information basically on each individual unit. What floor it's on, how many bedrooms it has, whether it's occupied or not, all of those kinds of questions. We have some projects in town with 40 or 50 individual units, individual apartments. That would have required 40 or 50 unique and distinct lines on an application form. So we've tried to simplify all of that by simply coming back to saying, how many floors do you have, and how many units by bedroom type? How many one bedroom, 2, 3, so on and so forth, so that it's not an unmanageable task to fill out the application for those people who have larger projects. So that's pretty straightforward, just a simple change to make the system work. It will still give us the information we need, just allows it to be easier for the applicant to complete the information and submit it to the city. There may be one other change that we're going to make there too. Right in the ordinance, it requires 2 pieces of information about the property, the map and lot number, and the parcel number. So those are 2 pieces of information that we keep on every parcel in the city. We probably only need 1 of those, so we may come back at second reading here and make another slight change. But this is just an effort to try to make the application process a little bit easier. We will be rolling this out in January for people to register prior to March 1st. And probably rolling it out late in January for people to get it in by March 1st. There's a 30-day period beyond that for people to complete the application. And then after that, if they don't complete the application and get the information to us, we can potentially fine them for not providing it. The goal of the information is pretty simple. There are times where we find it's very difficult to find or contact the owners or the responsible parties for a property. So, for example, we have a fire at 2 o'clock in the morning in an apartment complex, or a fire alarm goes off at 2 o'clock in the morning in an apartment complex, and we can't track the owner or a responsible party down to come and turn off the fire alarm or to come and deal with the problem. So we're trying to get information on ownership, property management, who the emergency contact number is for a problem, and some basic information about buildings that we may not otherwise have. So it's pretty straightforward, simple effort to make things a little bit more streamlined.
Questions, comments? Councilor Khalid?
How are people notified?
We will be sending a letter out to every property owner of a multifamily building. That's defined as any building with 3 or more rental units in it. The application process itself will be online. People will be able to go out to our website, fill in the information, and simply hit submit. As I said, there's no fee associated with the application. It's just trying to get the information from people into our system so that we have better ways of contacting people when we need to, either for routine stuff like the fire department wanting to arrange for an inspection or an emergency situation.
Councilor Clements?
Just by way of edification, at no fee, I can understand the reason for that. You're trying to induce the property owners to get into this. But I did read in here that there's going to be some cost, perhaps, in the future to upgrading software and stuff to manage this data.
There's already some costs that have been built in this year's budget. In particular, we added a position in the city's clerk's office, because the clerk's office will be the ones that will be handling the application process. So that's going to be a cost, plus the cost of doing the mailings and some of those other things, which are relatively minor. We do have some potential software costs that we may be confronting as we go forward. That stuff we're still working through.
Any thought perhaps to a renewal fee or something like that to help with those costs?
The ad hoc committee really recommended against a fee because they're looking to get the landlords to cooperate and provide this information without adding to their cost and their cost burden. There was a lot of discussion about that at the committee level. The whole process started when a recommendation came forward from the Public Health Committee that had worked with code enforcement. The initial proposal was that this would be a fee-based system. The idea being that those fees would then be used to add additional code enforcement personnel so that apartments could be inspected more rapidly. The approach that ended up coming out of this process was to try to get voluntary cooperation through a no-fee program and to try to enhance our inspection process in a couple of ways, one of which was hiring another fire inspector and having that individual be largely responsible for what I'll call the proactive inspections, is supplementing what the engine companies do. Code enforcement, unfortunately, is often very reactive because they're responding to complaints and calls from the public.
Any other questions or comments? Move right on.
This is part of welcome to the brave new world of telecommunications. As you are aware, or I suspect you're aware, the next generation of cell phones is being called 5G, and 5G is designed to be much quicker with higher speeds and to be associated with things like self-driving cars and all of those kinds of things. 5G systems, current cell phone systems largely operate off of fairly large towers, although in some instances they're supplemented with what I'll call small cells, and I'll get into that in a minute, but most of them are off the big towers that you see driving around. The 5G system will be run off a very distributed system. 5G systems require what are called small cell transmitters or units to be located pretty much every 300 to 500 feet, depending upon the topography that you're dealing with. Trees get in the way, buildings get in the way, those kinds of things. So that where today you may have towers on buildings, and you see them all over town that are serving a fairly large area, 5Cell will require towers or units to be located fairly close together throughout the community. When you take that and you add in the fact that you have multiple providers who will want to go to this kind of equipment, and that those providers tend to not, or there are some limits on to the extent to which they can use the same units, we are potentially looking at blocks in the city that may have 4 or 5 of these units installed in them. In most instances, they sit on top of telephone poles, and I gave you all some examples, some pictures of the good, the bad, and the ugly that could result from these kinds of installations. The further complicating factor is that the federal government, through the Federal Communications Commission, has largely but not totally preempted the ability of local government to regulate the placement of these devices. Pretty much have said that we have to allow them wherever the utility companies want, again, within some restrictions that we can impose on them. And under some circumstances, we can require certain things of them, but we basically can't say no, is what it comes down to. So what we're trying to do in this memo is we worked with a group of other municipalities, with the Maine Municipal Association. The Maine Municipal Association came up with what they recommended as a standard ordinance that could be looked at to be adopted. We've taken that standard ordinance and we've modified it somewhat. As a part of that process, there was a lot of communication between the municipalities and the providers, because the providers were concerned coming in that 5G be exempted from zoning ordinances. And the reason they wanted it exempted from zoning ordinances, they didn't want to have to go to 450 separate communities and however many separate planning boards there are and have each of these installations looked at and permitted through a planning board process. I think we can all understand that. There's clearly an advantage to supporting the technology and making speeds and accessibility better. So we came up with what I think is a compromise that allows us to regulate some things and to have some control over these items and where they go, but to also recognize that we pretty much can't say no. It's got to be very interesting to watch what's happening around the country, because in some places, as these things are popping up, people are having meltdowns over it, because these poles are showing up in areas where there are no poles, where everything's underground, and all of a sudden, no warning, no notice, here come these installations between your sidewalk and the street with these big poles sticking up in the air. And I think there's one example there, the first one, just shows you how horribly ugly this could be if it's not somewhat controlled. The other thing we're trying to do in this ordinance is to deal with the traditional pole permit process. In Maine, utilities have free right of access to the public right-of-way for the purposes of providing utility service. So all of the poles that you see with telephone and electric and cable and all the other wires on it are there because the state says they have the right to be there. We do have the right to permit the pole locations. Historically, the permit fee was limited by the state to $10. And quite honestly, I think because it was such a minimal amount of money and because it was such a pain in the you-know-what to deal with all of these applications, when you consider the number of poles we have, municipalities have not really paid enough attention to pole location. So we have run into a whole series of issues and problems with telephone poles in our community. For example, we recently a hole in a piece of pavement we had just put down. That clearly was a violation. It was something they had. We forced them to move. They couldn't do anything with it. We've had problems with relocations when utility projects come up or street projects come up, and we say you've got to move your poles. Sometimes it's difficult to get those poles moved. I know that there have been communities that basically have basically paved streets and had poles still standing in them because the utility hadn't removed them. We haven't had quite that much trouble here, but we do have problems. And then we have replacement poles. Replacement poles replace existing poles. We have several in the community where the replacement pole was installed over a year ago and the old pole is still there. Hasn't been removed, which again can create obstacles to our plows and stuff like that. We have guy wires that are too low so that our snow plows can't get under them. So there's a whole lot of problems that have been associated with it. And I will say, I think probably to some extent it's because we haven't taken the issue seriously enough. So what this ordinance does in the first part is it deals with the traditional pole location process and tries to tighten that up. First, it requires standards of what they have to tell us about, where the pole's going to go, what kind of information they have to give us, provides us with plans for the location, gives us enough information to make sure that it's adequate. So it clarifies the information we have to get, indicates that they have to avoid violating the Americans with Disabilities Act by blocking sidewalks in particular, identifies when a replacement pole has to get a new permit. The replacement pole is simply a replacement for an existing pole. They're not required to get a new permit, but if it changes its impact, if it's bigger, if it's in a different place, they would have to get one. Requires any unsafe situations that we become aware of, requires the utility to deal with it right away. There are times you walk around town, you see these loose wires kind of hanging around, coming down a pole. We want to be able to get the utility to clean that up. There's a guy wire that's too low or that's broken or there's a wire that's hanging down on the side of a pole. We want them to take care of that. Gives us the authority to correct that. There's another issue that came up and the legislature helped us out on. In return for having free right of putting their poles up in our right-of-way, utilities are supposed to provide what's called a municipal space on that pole. That's a space that we can use for traditional governmental purposes. A good example might be running fire alarm wiring, running wiring to our police department and to traffic signals and stuff like that. handling some of our cameras. So those kinds of things, they're supposed to give us free space on the poles. Historically, at least in recent years, because municipalities have not used all of that space, other utilities have moved in and used it. You know, if the city's not using it, why shouldn't the cable company go up there or somebody else use that space? Which is fine, except when the municipality has wanted to use that space, the utility then charges the municipality what's called a make-ready fee, so that the municipality pays the utility to relocate out of the municipal space. So they're trespassing in the space, we have to pay them to move. The state, in its wisdom, I have to give the legislature at least one pat on the back, managed to change that and say they can't charge make-ready space if they're just relocating out of the municipal space. So our ordinance also makes it clear that that's our space, requires 180-day notice for poles to be removed after a new pole's been put in a similar period of time for them to relocate a pole for a utility project. It also allows us to charge fees in excess of what's been required in the past. That $10 fee limit in the state legislation has been removed, and we're going to be proposing fees similar to what the FCC has indicated they feel is acceptable for small cell installations and other purposes. That's the first part of the ordinance. That's actually the simplest part of the ordinance. The wireless small cell telecommunications, which is Article 2, is more complicated because it does attempt to carefully walk through a line of what we can and what we can't regulate. So again, there'll be a permitting process where they'll have to apply for a permit and give us the information we need to evaluate them. The ordinance clearly does state that small cell installations are allowed throughout the city regardless of the zoning area. That's quite honestly simply a recognition of federal preemption of our ability to control that. It clearly establishes a preference that these utilities be co-located rather than located on new poles, so that when somebody's looking to put in a small cell, the first choice ought to be to find a way to co-locate with existing utilities. We have enough poles in our right-of-way. We don't need more if we can avoid it. It also spells out circumstances where they would be allowed to put in a standalone pole, a standalone installation. If they do put in a standalone installation, it requires them to allow co-location under reasonable terms and conditions, so that again, it can be used by other utilities and avoid duplication of pole structures. There will be fees for the permitting process, and those fees again will follow the federal guidelines of what the FCC feels is reasonable. There will be a required public notice. Under current laws, when utilities install a pole, they do require a notice be published in the newspaper, and they give people a chance to object. That same process will apply to small cell. I'm going to tell you, I don't think it's used very often because, again, most times people don't even realize that it's been published in the newspaper, but at least there'll still be a possibility for somebody to object if they become aware of it. To the greatest degree possible, the ordinance specifies that the installation would have no unreasonable adverse impact on sites or districts that are historic, areas designated for revitalization, including streetscape improvement areas or areas where we already require utilities to be located underground, and identified scenic resources. So right now, for example, we have no overhead utilities on Lisbon Street. We cannot prohibit a small cell from locating on Lisbon Street and installing a pole. But we can require them to do it in a way that has minimal impact, that's aesthetic, that matches, like, for example, the aesthetic street lights that we have. We can also try to first, even before that, urge that they find another location, if possible, for the pole. Requires removal of the facilities in a timely basis if they're abandoned. Applies the penalties specified in state law for violations of municipal land use law if they do things in a violation of the ordinance. So basically, it just sets up a pretty straightforward and not too complicated regulatory scheme that gives us some control over this stuff. I will also indicate that this is new stuff that's coming up, and I suspect that this is a first effort. There will probably need to be changes and adjustments in this. Some of the pictures you have there that show a good and a bad next to each other, those are from the city of Denver. The city of Denver has a 90-page design guideline booklet that specifies how these installations are to be put in. We don't have the staff capability to spend to put together a 90-page booklet like that, like the city of Denver does. But clearly, as we get into this process and see this stuff starting to show up, we may have to come back and revisit parts of this and make it a little tougher or make our standards a little bit clearer. But it is at least a start to try to get to where we need to go in terms of regulating this before it gets out of control. Just to run over the fees themselves, the ordinance requires first and second reading. Tonight will be first reading, second reading will be in 2 weeks. There may even by that point be a couple of small changes because I think in the ordinance as written, we're asking all guy wires to be 7 feet over the sidewalk, and Dale tells me they ought to be 8 feet to allow our sidewalk plow to get under them and not to run into problems, so we'll make that change. There'll probably be other changes in the future. But in terms of permits, we're talking about an application review fee of $500 for up to 5 facilities. So you can come in with a permit for 5 at $500, and $100 for each additional one beyond 5. We're suggesting after the fact permit, if somebody puts it in and doesn't get a permit, that they would have to pay a $500 fee because they're coming in after the fact. We have about 30 of these units already installed in the city. None of those have permits. We will give them basically a no-cost permit to come in because we do need to know where they are and we need to know what poles they're on, in part because those units are located on poles that may and frequently do have our street lights on them. And we need to know they're there because there are some limits about working around these units. And there may be times where we have to call someone and have them take the unit offline so that we can do some work. We also need to know where they are in case we need to contact somebody if a pole gets hit or something like that happens in the community. If they violate our ADA requirements by placing a pole in a sidewalk, blocking a sidewalk, there's a $1,000 fine. We really want to get their attention to not do that because it's very disruptive, and once they're in, it's hard to get them relocated and removed. We're talking about $100 per day for failure to remove a pole within the 180-day period, either because it's been replaced or because we need it moved for a construction project. And basically, that's the kind of thing we're looking at in terms of fees and stuff like that, but this we can go over in more detail in a couple of weeks as we get to it. Probably I'll have it on the workshop agenda a week from tonight so you can see the fees in more detail. But that's basically what we're trying to do. This is an area I think that a lot of communities are struggling with. Some people are going into an awful lot of detail, as I mentioned, cities like Denver. Boston, I think, has done something just as extensive, but this at least gives us a starting point to have some control over this, because it could otherwise get totally out of control in some places.
I think it's kind of concerning. I mean,
Yeah, well, the FCC has basically preempted local control on this issue. That's in court, by the way, as is everything these days, being appealed to see whether their ruling holds up or not. At the same time, I can understand the concern of the telecommunications companies where they don't want to have to go to every planning board in the state and try to have a fight over every location if you've got to put in, literally thousands of these items around the state.
that's terrible technology, though, if you have to put them in every, how many, 100 feet, 500 feet?
300 to 500 feet, and that's the current, that may improve over time, but that's apparently the current standard that they're looking at,
And
yes.
by then, we're going to have poles lined up in areas that they're not currently.
Well, that's why we want them to go onto existing pole. I think there may be one, we've gotten one application, or we have one situation where they're going to put up a new pole. Most of them are on existing poles. You've probably seen them, they're little metal cans, little round metal cans sitting on top. There's one right over by Simona's, sitting on top of the telephone pole right in front of Simona's restaurant. In most instances, they're not horribly problematic. But the ones that are being put in today in Lewiston are largely to fill in existing cell service in areas of high demand or where they may have some blockage, they can't get to an area with what they have elsewhere. When they go to 5G, my impression is it's going to have to be a little bit larger and a little bit more complex piece of equipment than just the kind of pick up, fill in spot things that they're putting out now.
Questions or comments from the council? Ms. Ray?
So I learned a lot of new words reading this. Definitely not an area of expertise. Abandonment. How do we tell if it's being used or if it's active or not? Is that something Dale and his guys can just tell when they walk by? Or I'm just so not versed in this.
Don't feel bad, we aren't either.
No, neither are we. In many cases, we can, because they've, a lot of the utilities may have come off, not all of them. If you were to drive down today onto Adams Avenue, the end of Adams Avenue, or you'd go up Birch Street up towards the high school, you'll see poles that are partially abandoned. They've moved over. If you were to drive down onto Cedar Street and head across the river, you'd see some poles that are completely abandoned. They've removed everything. And so in some cases, it's going to be difficult, but in other cases, it's relatively easy to tell simply because the leading and trailing utilities are severed. I think it's going to become a little bit more challenging with a small cell and the 5G, because that's going to exist on a pole. It's self-contained. But I think our guys are in tune enough with a lot of the entities to know they've moved, and they're probably permitting something else. When they permit something else, that's a replacement permit for one that exists. That's why we want this 180 days to say, that's it, you need to remove your pole. So I think some's going to be by communication, some's going to be by observation.
Okay.
Yeah,
I trust you.
well, it's a very interesting area because Maine is very generous with allowing utilities to locate in the right-of-way. In other parts of the country, there is a franchise fee associated with that. So, for example, the community I was in Texas, it received either 2 or 3% of the utility's gross revenues in the community in return for the right to use the right-of-way. And, again, that gets passed on to the consumer, obviously, but it was a recognition of the value of the right-of-way. Here, they get to use the right-of-way with no charge. We do get, at least now, hopefully, no fee, no cost ability to use the municipal space on the poles. But having all of those telephone poles in a community creates issues for Public Works and for the community to deal with. And it's basically been the state saying, well, we're willing to trade that inconvenience at the municipal level to the ability of the utilities to serve the public.
I've got a follow-up question, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So will there be a need for more or higher pole density in higher density residential areas? I'm thinking specifically of Ward 3 and 5, where there's lots of folks trying to use
That's one of the
service.
things that I think we're still going to have to look at. I did in the process just recently looking at some of these design manuals that I was looking at to get pictures and stuff. There are some communities that put a limit on how much they can extend the height of an existing pole and on overall pole height. That one picture you saw, you can see how much higher the new pole is than the old pole. So we may want to come back and take a look at that and see if that's necessary at some point. I don't know that they gain a whole lot by height on those issues. Clearly, there must have been a reason for it at that location, so it's something we may need to keep our eye on.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Councilor Jensen?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I just want to say that I very much like the changes, particularly getting the authority to ask utilities to fix loose and hanging wires. So I think I personally really like that aspect. And you also mentioned that there'd be a $1,000 fine for ADA violations, like putting a pole on the middle of the
Yes.
sidewalk. Was there any, like, currently existing, punishment's not the word I'm thinking of, maybe like a
Yeah,
fine or something?
a few years ago, we did put in our code, we're replacing one part of our code that already has that fine and moving it into this new chapter. So we already had a fine for that. Came about as a result of the telephone pole that was put right in the middle of a brand-new sidewalk.
Great, thank you.
You know, I mean, you would think that, and I don't necessarily blame the utility for that, because they often contract with somebody to do that work. But still, you would think people would have more common sense than that. We had someone looking to put in a 5G, a small cell, right outside of the hospital on Main Street. And their initial plans, they never went ahead with it, but their initial plan, they showed us a drawing that showed the sidewalk with the pole right in the middle of it. You know, it's amazing that they would even think they could do that.
We don't incur any liability in situations like that if they go ahead and violate the ADA or anything? The city doesn't incur any liability, or do they?
That's we may have some issues with that. I mean, clearly if there's a pole out there right now that is in violation of the ADA or putting the city sidewalk in violation of ADA, we have an obligation to try to address that. Dale has started to try to have some conversations with the utilities, identifying some of what we consider to be problematic pole locations. For example, in the downtown area in particular, where you have buildings right on the sidewalk, there are poles located at intersections that make it virtually impossible to meet ADA requirements. There are ways around it, which may involve bump outs into the street or other relocations. It's not clear to me at the moment to what extent we can demand that that be done, but it's something we're looking at and having discussions with the utilities about.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, that concludes our workshop.
Yes.
We'll be in
10-minute
recess.
break.
Yeah.
other notes we think of.
Good evening, and I'll call the City Council Business Meeting to order, January 7th, 2020. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of December 17th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor LaJoy, seconded by Councilor Ray. All in favor?
Yep, motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Okay, roll call.
All roll call votes for this meeting will begin with the Councilor of Ward 1.
Agenda item number 1.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, if we could just back up for public comment.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. So public comment, any member of the public may make comments regarding issues pertaining to Lewiston City Government, 3-minute maximum per speaker. Maximum time for all comments is 15 minutes. And if there's no one in the audience who'd like to offer public comment, we can just close public comment and go to the next item.
Thank you. We'll consider public comment period closed and move to agenda item number 1.
Item number 1, adoption of the rules to govern the city council for the ensuing council year. Requested action to adopt the rules to govern the city council for the period of January 7th, 2020 to January 4th, 2022 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Ray, seconded by Councilor LaJoy.
Mr. Mayor, just a quick comment. We did give you a somewhat revised version tonight. It basically made 2 changes at the request of Councilor Ray. The first is in Section 4, the word chairman was changed to chair. And in Section 15, which is the area talking about rules governing public comment, we added a new item 10 that first clarified that the time limit that applies to the general public comment, the 3-minute time limit, would also apply to comments on any specific agenda item during the meeting. And again, extended that courtesy to other to members of other boards, commissions, and committees who are presenting on an item that's of interest to that committee. So if they're there in their professional position as a member of a city organization, the 3 minutes wouldn't apply to them.
All right, thank you. Questions or comments from the council? Councilor Ray?
So, as the person requesting those changes, I just wanted to clarify that, so it had been provided for under public comment for workshops, but not under meetings, and I think sometimes things aren't workshopped before they come to us. I don't think it should be enshrined in the rules, but it just might be a general understanding that folks who are on the boards, commissions, and committees might approach the presiding officer before the meeting or the subject comes up, just to kind of pre-warn that they would like to speak on it in that capacity. It just seems like the courteous move, so.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
require an
Councilor
amendment?
Clement?
Does this require amendment to the presentation that we have already on the agenda?
So, say that again, please?
Does this require we amend the item that we already have as a presentation?
No, because the motion before you is to adopt the rules as presented, and so what we presented to you this evening is just, has some small minor revisions compared to what you received in your book on Friday, or Sunday in this case. So really, the motion is to approve the rules as a set. You've received them as a set, so there's no amendment required. Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll move it to the public. Any questions or comments from the public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2.
Item number 2, public hearing on applications for a new liquor license and special amusement permit for live entertainment for Baxter Brew Pub LLC, 120 Mill Street. Requested action to authorize the city clerk's office to approve a new liquor license application and special amusement permit for Baxter Brew Pub LLC, 120 Mill Street.
So moved. Second.
Okay, moved by Counselor Pettingill, seconded by Counselor Jensen. Questions or comments from the council? If not, to the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
and Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3.
Item number 3, public hearing on the renewal application for a special amusement permit for live entertainment for Fraternal Order of Eagles, 1327 Sabata Street. Requested action to grant a special amusement permit for live entertainment to the Fraternal Order of Eagles, 1327 Sabata Street.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Counselor LaJoy, seconded by Counselor Jensen. Questions or comments from the council? Okay, I'll move it into a public hearing. To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
and Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
So let me just clarify, if it's an actual public hearing, do I go to the public before the council, or does it matter?
It doesn't really matter, as long as you go to the public.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Thank you.
Sure.
Agenda item number
4,
4.
public hearing on the renewal application for a special amusement permit for live entertainment for LA Public Theater Incorporated, 31 Maple Street. Requested action to grant a special amusement permit for live entertainment to the LA Public Theater Incorporated, 31 Maple Street.
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Jelinas, seconded by Counselor Ray. Any questions or comments from the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
and Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 5.
Item number 5, public hearing and first passage for ordinance amending Chapter 18, Article 6, Section 18-96F to the Code of Ordinances, registration process requirement for multifamily buildings. Requested action to approve first passage of an ordinance amending Chapter 18, Article 6, Section 18-96, subsection F, to the Code of Ordinances, registration process requirement for multifamily buildings, and to continue the public hearing to the next regularly scheduled city council meeting.
So
So-
moved.
Second.
Moved by Counselor Clement, seconded by Counselor LaJoy. Questions or comments from the council? Counselor Ray?
I just wanted to check, and I should have asked this during the workshop, but this is a staff-initiated amendment, yes?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
and Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 6.
Item number 6, public hearing and first passage for ordinance adopting a new Chapter 71 to the Code of Ordinances regulating above-ground power, fiber, and telecommunications installations, including utility poles in the public right-of-way. Requested action to approve first reading of an ordinance adopting a new Chapter 71 to the Code of Ordinances regulating above-ground power, fiber, and telecommunications installations, including utility poles in the public right-of-way, and continuing the public hearing to the next regular city council meeting.
Question. Moved by Counselor LaJoy, seconded by Counselor Jensen. Questions or comments from the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 7.
Item number 7, public hearing and first passage for ordinance amending Appendix A of the Zoning and Land Use Code relating to solar energy systems. Requested action to approve first passage of an ordinance amending Appendix A of the Zoning and Land Use Code relating to the solar energy systems and to continue the public hearing to the next regularly scheduled city council meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor Pettingill. Questions or comments from the council? To the public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
and Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Agenda item number 8.
Item number 8, order authorizing the city manager to execute the necessary documents to sell the property at 5 Peter Boulevard to Eugene and Lydia Gilbert. Requested action, to approve the order authorizing the city manager to execute the necessary documents to sell the property at 5 Peter Boulevard to Eugene and Lydia Gilbert.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor Khalid. Questions or comments from the council? Counselor Joy?
Yeah, correction on the, one of the words in here. It would be the first paragraph, last sentence. I recommended it be sold for, must be no less than 13,000. You have NDESS on there. Right.
I believe it's a formatting issue, nothing else. It's just the kerning is too close onto the letter, so it looks like a D.
Where exactly was that again,
Under
Counselor?
information.
That was the first paragraph, last sentence. Just before you get
Oh,
to
of the
13,178.64.
Or no less than.
Oh, it's missing an O.
You see it?
Or no
Yeah, I know,
less than.
OT.
Yes, that should be no less than.
Oh, no, yeah.
I don't know if it makes a huge difference. I just thought I'd bring it to your attention.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Anyone like city administrator's thoughts on this, or are we comfortable with it? Counselor Ray?
Yeah, so I was going to ask, just remembering a process similar to this during the last term of the council, it was for the council to decide who to award the bid to, rather than a requested action going with the highest bidder. Could you explain the difference between those?
Yeah, the council, the prior council originally authorized the city to sell this property. We put it out to bid. Part of our process of getting rid of property, we have to go to the planning board to get a recommendation. The planning board made a recommendation. They also established a minimum price that they were looking for. That is not a binding, it's just a recommendation. When we went out to bid, we included that minimum in the bid. We did not receive any bids. Following that lack of bids, we were contacted by 2 different parties requesting or expressing interest, so we put it out to bid a second time. That time, we didn't even include the no less than amount, but we actually got a bid that was over that amount anyway. So the normal practice for most of these properties is that we put them out to bid and see what comes back. Council will normally take into account 2 things: the bid price, if any, and the proposed use of the property. So you're not necessarily required to take the high bid, for example, if you like somebody else's proposed use better. And then the council gets to decide whether to retain or sell the property and under what conditions. So frequently, when we sell the property, as in this instance, where it's being sold to build a house, we will include that requirement in the actual deed, that the person purchasing the property will actually construct a residence on the property.
Counselor Ray?
And just to follow up, in the bid, it talks about the now land-only parcel at 5 Peter Boulevard, and it referenced a unit that was there before, I'm guessing a residential building. Did we demolish that?
We did. It was a single-family residence. It was one of those properties that got caught in the housing crash. It was owned by a party that abandoned the property. The mortgage company would not complete foreclosure on it. They just let it sit there. They started foreclosure but never completed the process. Eventually, the roof failed. It, for a couple of years, had a blue tarp on the roof, and it eventually just got to the point where it wasn't salvageable. So the city went in and demolished it, and we acquired the property on tax title because the bank stopped paying taxes. That was not an unusual circumstance in that period of time, in that many people were abandoning properties. Was more predominantly seen in the multifamily sector than in the single-family sector, which is the situation here. And frequently, banks would not complete foreclosure. In this instance, they most likely had a federally guaranteed loan, so there was really no incentive for the bank to complete foreclosure because they were being held whole or largely whole by federal guarantees.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? And I can't remember if I went to the public already, but I'm just,
I don't believe yet.
okay. So to the public, and back to the council. All right, call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
And Ward 7?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
All right, agenda item number 9.
Item number 9, order authorizing execution of a municipal quitclaim deed for real estate located at 378 Pine Woods Drive. Requested action to approve the order authorizing execution of a municipal quitclaim deed for real estate located at 378 Pine Woods Drive.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Ray, seconded by Councilor Pettengill. Questions or comments from the council? To the public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
And Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Agenda item number 10.
Item number 10, authorization for the city clerk and/or deputy city clerk to approve and sign all applications to operate Beano, Bingo, and other games of chance on behalf of the municipal officers. Requested action, ordered that the city council hereby authorizes the city clerk and/or deputy city clerk to approve and sign all applications to operate Beano, Bingo, and other games of chance on behalf of the municipal officers during the period January 7th, 2020 through January 4th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Jensen, seconded by Councilor LaJoy. Questions or comments from the council? To the public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counsel from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
And Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Agenda item number 11.
Item number 11, authorization for the city clerk and/or deputy city clerk to approve and sign all permits for circuses and carnivals on behalf of the municipal officers. Requested action, ordered that the city council hereby authorizes the city clerk and/or deputy city clerk to approve and sign all permits for a circus or carnival on behalf of the municipal officers during the period January 7th, 2020 through January 4th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Jelinas and seconded by Councilor Pettengill. Questions or comments from the council? It's going to get much more exciting as we move through other
It is.
meetings, right? Okay. To the public? Back to the council? All right, call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
And Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Thank you. Agenda item number 12.
Item number 12, authorization for the city clerk and/or deputy city clerk to sign all liquor license applications on behalf of the municipal officers. Requested action, ordered that the city council hereby authorizes the city clerk and/or deputy city clerk to sign all liquor license applications on behalf of the municipal officers during the period January 7th, 2020 through January 4th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Jensen, seconded by Councilor Ray. Questions or comments from the council?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Jelinas.
My question is, this applies not just for a new business, but, or renewal, but if there's new ownership. Am I correct about that?
Correct, yes, yes.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the council? To the public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
And Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 13.
Item number 13, authorization for the city clerk and/or deputy city clerk to approve and sign all applications for utility pole permits on behalf of the municipal officers. Requested action, order that the city council hereby authorizes the city clerk and/or deputy city clerk to approve and sign all applications for utility pole permits on behalf of the municipal officers during the period January 7th, 2020 through January 4th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Khalid, seconded by Councilor LaJoy. Any questions or comments from the council? Councilor Ray.
We just talked about small cell. Does that count? Is that defined as utility pole in the same
It
way?
is, I think it's covered in the ordinance that we are talking about, yes, I think
Great.
it would be covered.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the council? To the public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counsel from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
And Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 14.
Item number 14, authorization for the city clerk and/or deputy city clerk to approve and sign all licenses for closeout sale permits on behalf of the municipal officers. Requested action, ordered that the city council hereby authorizes the city clerk and/or deputy city clerk to approve and sign all licenses for closeout sale permits on behalf of the municipal officers during the period January 7th, 2020 through January 4th, 2022.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilor Jensen, seconded by Councilor Pettengill. Questions or comments from the council? To the public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
And Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 15.
Item number 15, authorization for the finance director, tax collector, and deputy treasurer to act on behalf of the municipal officers regarding deeds, liens, and municipal investments. Requested action, ordered that the city council hereby authorizes the finance director, tax collector, or deputy treasurer to withhold monies payable by the city of Lewiston to cover taxes due pursuant to Maine Revised Statutes Annotated Title 30A, Section 905, to sign on behalf of the city the necessary deeds and liens and tax settlements, and to invest funds in accordance with the Maine Revised Statutes Annotated Title 30A, Section 5706, during the period January 7th, 2020 through January 4th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Jelinas, seconded by Councilor Jensen. Any questions or comments from the council? To the public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
And Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 16.
Item number 16, authorization for city administrator or deputy city administrator to approve or deny all requests to hang banners, post community event signs on municipal property, and place temporary signs, flags, and decorations in the public right-of-way on behalf of the municipal officers. Requested action, ordered that the city council hereby authorizes the city administrator or deputy city administrator to review and approve or deny all requests to hang banners, post community event signs on city property, and place temporary signs, flags, and decorations in the public right-of-way on behalf of the municipal officers during the period of January 7th, 2020 through January 4th, 2022.
So, second.
Moved by Councilor Ray, seconded by Councilor LaJoy. Any questions or comments from the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
And Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Okay, agenda item number 17.
Item number 17, authorization for deputy city administrator and/or finance director to have signatory authority for the city administrator when the administrator is unavailable. Requested action, ordered that the city council hereby authorizes the deputy city administrator, or in the absence of the deputy city administrator, the finance director, to have signatory authority for the city administrator when the administrator is unavailable during the period of January 7th, 2020 through January 4th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor Pettengill. Questions or comments from the council? To the public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
and Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Okay, agenda item number 18.
Item number 18, appointment of city council representatives to various boards and committees. And if you look on the next page, is where the motion will appear. The motion is to approve the following appointments of the city council representatives to the various boards and committees. And for the record, Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and read that.
Please.
If you'd like. Okay. So 911 Committee, Councilor LaJoy. Airport Board of Directors, Councilor Jensen. Androscoggin County Budget Committee, Councilors Pettengill and Councilor Ray. Androscoggin Valley Council of Governments General Assembly, Councilor Clement and Councilor Jelinas. Cable TV Advisory Committee, Councilor LaJoy. Community Development Block Grant Committee, Councilor Khalid. Complete Streets Committee, Councilor Pettengill. Housing Committee, Councilor Khalid. LA Transit Committee, Councilor Pettengill. Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission, Councilor Ray. Lewiston Auburn Public Health Committee, Councilor Jelinas. Loan Qualification Committee, Councilor Clement. Library Board of Trustees is the mayor. Maine Municipal Association Legislative Policy Committee, Councilor Ray, and the city administrator are already serving on that. It's a 2-year term. Recycling and Waste Reduction, Councilor Jensen. South Park Industrial Park Board of Directors, Council President and the Mayor. And Youth Advisory Council, Councilor Pettengill and Councilor Jensen.
Any questions or comments from the council? And Ed, can you tell us, so how will all councilors know the dates of these meetings?
They will be contacted by the appropriate staff people who work with these various committees and give you the information. And if you have any questions as you get started on that, that would be the person to talk to as the individual who contacted you about the meeting.
Very good, thank you. To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll?
Did anyone make a motion?
Oh, did we? Hey,
Move the nominations.
Second.
moved by Councilor Jensen, seconded by Councilor Ray. You know, we were on quite a roll, so. All right, thank you, Councilor Ray. Call the roll?
Counselor from Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
and Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0. And I'll also say, since we're on that page, it doesn't require a vote, but you'll notice at the bottom of the page that the council president has made his appointments to the Finance Committee, and those will be Councilor Clement and Councilor Khalid. So it's a
Thank you
direct
for-
appointment by the council president. Doesn't require a vote, but we'll just mention that for the record.
All right, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Agenda item number 19.
Agenda item number 19, appointment of citizens to various city boards and committees. There are several items for requested action, so we'll do these one at a time. The first is to receive the mayor's appointments to various city boards and committees. No council action is required, but we are happy to announce that for the record, if you'd
Please,
like.
yeah.
So Mayor Kayer has made the following appointments. Again, no council vote is required. Mayor Kayer is appointing the following citizens to boards and committees. Board of Appeals, 1 full member, 5-year term, Daniel Doobie. Complete Streets Committee, 1 full member, 3-year term, Craig Saddlemeyer. Finance Committee, 1 full member position, 3-year term, Renee Bernier. Historical Preservation Review Board, 2 full member positions, 3-year terms, David Chittum and Doug Hodgkin. 1 full member position for a 1-year term, Paul Robinson, and 1 associate member position for a 1-year term, Sandra Markey. For the Planning Board, the mayor has appointed for 1 full member position for a 5-year term, Linda Scott, and 1 associate member position, 4-year term, Timothy Joseph Gallant. So that's the first item for requested action, basically just to receive the mayor's appointments, which we've done. The next item for requested action is to approve the mayor's nominations regarding his appointments to the Library Board of Trustees, and a city council vote is required. So that's on the next page in your book. Mayor Kayer is nominating the following citizens to serve on the Library Board of Trustees. 3 full member positions for 3-year terms each, Elizabeth Clifford, Daniel Jenkins, and Darby Ray. 1 full member position for a 2-year term, Barbara Benjamin McGinnis. and one full member position for a one-year term, Abdefata Afara, for the library board positions.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor Jensen. Questions or comments from the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll. Oh, Counselor Ray?
I just wanted to thank the city clerk for providing us with the applications for this.
Yes, thank you. You're welcome.
All right, call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
And Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0. The third item for requested action is to approve the Lewiston Area Public Health Committee's nominations to that committee. That also requires a council vote. So the Lewiston Area Public Health Committee is nominating the following citizens to serve on their committee. 4 full-member positions, area resident positions, 3-year terms each. Paul Gavro, Lindsay Henry, Philip Ryu, and William Wallace.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor LaJoy. Questions or comments from the council?
Mayor, Mr. Mayor, is this the same committee that's referenced as the Lewiston Auburn Public Health Committee, and here it's referenced as Lewiston Area?
Yes.
Okay.
So actually, they had it changed. So if it says Auburn, that is a mistake by staff. We failed to update that. We apologize.
No, I didn't mean it that way, I was just trying to
Yes.
understand if it was the same
Right,
committee.
it is the same committee. So, yeah, sorry about that, yes.
Oh, thank you for picking that up. Any other questions or comments? Okay, to the public? Back to the council? And if not, call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
And Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Okay, agenda item number 20.
Item number 20, reports and updates.
Counselor Ray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the school committee has not yet met since we were just sworn in last night, but we do have a all-day retreat planned for Saturday, 8 to 4:30. And of course, since we are all elected members, that is a public meeting. We will be talking about our goals and plans, working with the new superintendent and setting his goals and plans as well. It should be a good meeting. I will say, I continue as the Regional Service Center representative on the school committee, and we had our my first meeting yesterday, replacing member Hutchinson from the former school committee. And that effort has been shared with you all due to its impact on taxes. So the state provides us extra funding because we are part of that regional service center. We're working on some new ideas, which the former chair of the school committee challenged me to do when I was appointed, so I hope that makes you happy, Mr. Mayor. And we're talking about a possible position, so an employee of that service center, working on equity and diversity with the 4 school units, which would be really cool to be able to loan out for professional development and working on bias within the school system.
That's interesting, thank you. Any other counselors have any reports or updates? All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, just one real quick thing. As you know, we sent out a little question about when we could schedule our council retreat. Again, we have done this every 2 years with the new council, spent most of a Saturday coming up with goals, priorities for the coming 2-year period. The date everybody looked like they were going to be good for February 29th. So if you would go ahead and confirm that date, we will have a facilitator who will help in that process. Be the same individual we used 2 years ago, Don Garish, who's a retired city manager for many years in Brunswick. He was interim in Auburn for a period of time. And did a good job 2 years ago. So I think it's a great opportunity to get away a little bit and spend some time focusing on where we would like to go over the next 2 years.
Thank you, and I much appreciated getting that set up in the first month of our council, so I think that makes a difference. Anyone else? Okay, agenda item number 21, any other city business councilors or others may have relating to the Lewiston City Government. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Wow, that was quick. All right, moved by Counselor Clement and seconded by Counselor LaJoy. All in favor? All right. Nice
And we would
job.
like to promise that all meetings will be this short, but I don't think we can.